It's different, I'll give it that. So here's a just this side of twee slacker comedy about a group of hipster friends built around the gimmicky premise that's mostly about showing off a specific handmade art aesthetic that feels more interested in being glibly cute than outright funny. And wait, no, come back. It's good. It's actually pretty good. Yeah, look guys, I'm as sick as anybody of watching moneyed art school brats dick around over long weekends with their pals and call it a movie. And if I never see another supporting character wearing a pork pie hat out of season indoors with a patterned button up and skinny jeans, it'll be too damn soon. But despite bearing all of those unmistakable hallmarks, plus why yes, I also liked Wes Anderson's earlier movies better, and the immediate universal red flag of actor turned first time writer director, Dave Made a Maze is actually pretty goddamn charming. I'm struggling a bit to define the tone of the thing though, to give you some idea of what you might be in for, to be honest, which is a good thing of course, because it highlights how surprisingly unique it actually is despite feeling kind of familiar. I guess in terms of tonality you could compare it to those Adult Swim standalone things, you know, like Too Many Cooks or uninterrupted footage of a bear, but without the acidic mean streak that you've come to associate with those. Maybe actually it's closer to the sci-fi fantasy paintball episodes of Community. In fact, like if you told me this started out as an abandoned pitch for Community the movie, I'd believe it. But anyway, Dave Made a Maze is a semi-surreal magic realist comedy which is about Nick Thune as a struggling directionless artist named Dave, but more or less stars Meera Rohit Kumbhani as his girlfriend Annie, who returns home from a work trip to discover that Dave has constructed an elaborate cardboard box fort in their living room, which he calls a maze and claims to have become lost in. Unable to coax him out, eventually Annie is joined by an assortment of her and Dave's friends who enter the maze in order to find him. At which point they discover that the maze actually is somehow much bigger on the inside. In fact, it's an endless full-scale labyrinth complete with booby traps, secret rooms, puzzles, dead ends, and even monsters, all made of cardboard and craft supplies and somehow operating on their own power. More troublingly, even though they manage to find Dave pretty quickly, he can't leave them out of the maze because even though he built it, it now seems to be expanding and growing on its own, even having birthed a cardboard minotaur to help ensure no one can escape, which in the process transforms the film from an offbeat fantasy into what you'd have to call a horror film, except for, well, you'll see, I'm not gonna spoil it. Now this is all just weird enough to qualify as outright abstract storytelling, which would be fine, but there is actually a logic at play, and if you know your supernatural, this inanimate object and or space is alive and malevolent and or hungry, scary stories, you'll very quickly figure out the gist of what the maze is and wants, even though the movie avoids ever spelling it out, because its main big joke is the way everyone involved is surprised by what's going on, but not as surprised as you might expect someone to otherwise be under the circumstances. So, yes, it's a movie about the tendency of obsessive yet non-committal artistic-minded people to not only become consumed by their creative projects, but also to consume the emotional lives of their friends and loved ones. Obvious metaphor is obvious. And if I'm being honest, the main thing that keeps the film from transcending a clever gimmick premise into something truly greater is that it kind of arrives at that central point pretty early, and this kind of stays there. Now, there's nothing wrong with that, certainly. It doesn't prevent the film from achieving its central goals of being charming and showing off the elaborate DIY effects and maze sets, but if you go in thinking that the film couldn't possibly be going to all this elaborate trouble just to say even artists and friends of artists have to keep an eye on the work-life balance, well, no, that's pretty much all it's got to say. Which, yes, does mean it kind of eventually slides into that Ready Player One problem where it's trying to be critical of its subject but doesn't seem to recognize how much there actually is to criticize, i.e., really, movie? You think that's all that's wrong with this guy? Because it's not. But fortunately, even if its thematic depth doesn't quite match its technical ambitions, it's a lot of fun to watch it just play out. The reason to watch is to see the maze stuff and basically watch ostensibly adult actors reenact the Goonies, but where everything is made of craft supplies, and see all the weird sight gags they came up with within that premise. It all feels endlessly inventive, even if it's intentionally avoiding adding up to much more than an especially off-kilter sitcom digression. And while the characters are somewhat insufferable by nature, outside of Kumbhani, whose thankless role as the grown-up is kind of the point for her character's frustration in the story, the cast is all game for it, and it's always nice to see James Urbaniak show up and steal a bunch of scenes, especially when, you know, half the audience is gradually going, oh, hey, that's Dr. Venture. I mean, really, there's not much higher praise that I can offer to a movie of this specific type than to say one of the characters shows up, announces themselves as an independent filmmaker, and somehow doesn't become an obnoxious faux meta bore. So, it's not for everyone, but it is cute and charming. 3 stars, it's currently making the indie theater and on-demand video circuit, so give it a look.